from the Ground Up, a podcast of the Alabama Extension Home Grounds team educating you about home landscapes, gardens, and home pests.
Pollinators play a vital role in not only our food supply, but also in maintaining a rich biodiversity in our ecosystem as well. Today we're joined by Allyson Shabel, Urban Regional Extension Agent in North Alabama. And she's here to talk about pollinators in your garden and landscape and how to provide food, protection, and a healthy environment. So welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Awesome. Well, we're glad to have you on, and I know you're really
passionate about pollinators.
Yeah, there you go. Passionate about pollinators, and I know a little about them, obviously, but I'm not as well versed in pollinators as you. So, tell me all you can about pollinators.
Well, pollinators are super important. Pollinators can be lots of different things, lots of different species. Brian, you could be a pollinator. People could be pollinators.
Yes.
Wind can be pollinator. But the majority of our pollination is done by animals, specifically insects. About 80% of our plants are pollinated by insects and other animal species. Things like bats, hummingbirds, bees. Bees are probably the workhorse of our pollinators. Birds, butterflies, flies, moths, those can all be pollinators. There's lots of different species. Anything that visits a flower can pollinate that flower.
Typically, when we say pollinators, people think of, butterflies or bees,
right.
And that's the two big ones, which obviously, they do, I guess, the majority of the work.
Right.
But things like you said, like bats. Who thinks about bats being pollinators?
Well, there are many flowers that are only open at night. So flowers have figured out ways to attract specific pollinators by doing specific things. So, for instance, the flowers are open at night, generally are white to attract things like bats and moths to pollinate them. Flies like to pollinate things that have a stinky smell like rotten meat. So flowers have figured out these ways to attract pollinators that work well for them. So one thing I will say is that pollinators, some of the best pollinators are those that are hairy. Mm-hmm. Things that have a little extra body hair on them, like bees, are really great at picking up pollen when they go to a flower accidentally and carrying it from one flower to the next. So usually the hairier the pollinator, the better it's going to be.
So how do we create a habitat for pollinators? What's the best practice for us to do? Obviously, planting different kinds of flowers.
Yeah,
what else?
Sure. So you think about habitat. Habitat's the same for any creature. They need food, shelter, and water. So if we can give all three of those things to pollinators, then we can go a far way to keeping them in our garden altogether. So as far as shelter, we'll start there. Everything needs shelter. Pollinators need shelter during the day when they are not busy pollinating. They tend to rest, they light somewhere, and they need somewhere safe. So somewhere that's close to their food source, but somewhere that's protected, something such as like an evergreen bush that has lots of small limbs on it, so that insect can light there and not get eaten by a bird. They also need shelter for their young. They need somewhere for to raise their young, and generally somewhere like think about a butterfly. They have to have somewhere to leave their chrysalis, somewhere that's kind of got lots of branches around it so a bird can't find it, somewhere it can camouflage in with that shrub. So lots of shrubbery next to your flowering plants is helpful for the pollinators to keep them protected, give them shelter. A lot of pollinators, and I probably talk about bees a lot. Native bees are just about my favorite thing. A lot of native bees, they spend the majority of their life in phases that are not their adult phase. So they need places They tend to nest in things like stems, hollow stems. So if you can leave some old brush in your garden, generally a native bee they're called cavity nesters. About 30% of the native bees are cavity nesters. If you will leave some hollow stems, so wait till your flowers die this year, the stems will be hollowed out next year, and that's when they would lay their eggs in there and raise their young. So you really need like 18 months to 2 years of dead stems in your garden to give them somewhere to lay their eggs. And so that might not be a pretty thing. I know my neighbors don't want to see old dead plants in my yard that are just, it just doesn't look nice all the time, right? So a way around that is to cut some of those stems, last year's stems, and just lay them, make a little brush pile in the back of your yard where nobody sees it, and just leave it there for a couple of years. That gives them those old stems that they need to lay in, and it keeps it out of sight for you and your neighbors. You could also build a habitat for them, for those cavity nesters. You can get a wood block that is not pressure treated. I've used like a 6x6 cut into about 1 foot sections, and you drill holes in it. If you go to the website xerces.com, they've got a really great step-by-step guide of how to create those habitats. Mm-hmm. And just follow that and put it out. You will get something in there every year.
And that's Xerces with an X.
xerces.org. You're right. Yeah, xerces.org. The other habitat that specifically native bees like, there's I think I said 30% nest in cavities, but 70% nest in the ground. And as gardeners, we're always told, keep mulch on the ground, keep mulch on the ground. Everything needs to be mulched or covered so the soil doesn't wash away. But native bees in particular, that 70% that are ground nesters need bare soil. So just finding some patches that you can leave bare soil in your garden, probably not somewhere that's really low that holds water, somewhere on the higher side that drains nicely, and bees will dig into that, and they will lay eggs in there.
Yeah, I think a lot of people get scared of when they see bees burrowing in the ground. They think it may be something like a yellow jacket or some other harmful bee.
Right.
And, we'll get calls about it that says, what do I spray on these bees? They're scared they're going to get attacked, but they're probably pretty docile, right?
Yeah, I really like to watch them. And, you mentioned wasps. There's a lot of native wasps that will build their nests in holes as well, and they're not harmful. You think about a yellow jacket, but there's plenty of other native wasps and bees that nest in the ground that don't do any damage at all. So that's food. That's shelter, right? Mm-hmm. But you also need to provide water for your bees and your native pollinators. Any sort of pollinator needs a water source. So if you are putting a water source in your garden, it would be best in a sunny location. That they somehow, the way the rays reflect off the water, it makes it more visible if it's in the sun as opposed to in the shade. So try to put your water location in a sunny spot, or at least somewhere with afternoon sun.
Just any source of water, like either a bird bath or
a
cup of water
fine. Even the trays that you put under pots. We all know those trays, and I know that we say don't leave them under pots because they hold too much water. Well, you can actually just take those and set them in your garden and fill those with water. If you'll change that water out about every 3 days, you won't have mosquitoes. They also just like puddles of water. They like to get minerals out of puddles from the mud beside the puddles. So any sort of water is good, the only thing that I would say is make sure that there's no pesticides in those waters or coming close to those waters. That's the only concern.
I think a lot of people, they'll try to get rid of mosquitoes, like you said. So changing the water is pretty important. And, anytime somebody has a mosquito problem, we'll tell them, buy the little little donut dunks that you can put in water, but that has BT in it. So that can kill a pollinator, right? Or does it?
I think it's okay.
Okay.
It is okay for bees.
Okay.
For sure. That would be something that would be good to check.
Yeah.
And maybe we should check that.
Yeah.
But really, if you just change out that water every 3 days, and generally, if you've got it in the full sun, it's going to be dried out in 3 days anyway, especially in the summertime. So that may not even be a concern long term.
So one of the habitats I saw on one of our tours that we did as a team was the little houses that you can build. It probably may be a little bit more attractive if you didn't want to have, just some brush laying around. And they use bamboo, right? Just kind of stack bamboo on top of each other in a little house.
That's one way to do it. And I think the idea behind bamboo is that bamboo is all different sizes. So you would get all different pollinators attracted to that. If you know exactly what sort of pollinator you want to try to attract, like specifically a native bee, you can gauge the size hole toward that specific bee and create the right size hole for that bee. But if you just kind of want to put one out there that's general and just kind of see what you get, kind of like fishing for bees, then the bamboo would be great. That they do need to be, all of those tubes need to be about 6 inches long, and native bees prefer to have the back of the tube solid. So those are the two things that I would say: 6 inches long with the back solid. And then another thing that people do that's very helpful, because we think about diseases are in everything: plants, insects, people, everything has diseases. And to reduce the disease potential, if you take paper and line those tubes, just wrap it around and make a little tube and stick it in that bamboo and change that out every year, then you go a long way to preventing diseases from one year to the next.
That's a really good tip.
Yeah.
I'm not that familiar with that kind of stuff. I just, we had seen that pollinator house that was built, and I thought that was kind of neat for people that want to attract pollinators. So, that's kind of more the unconventional, which I guess there's a lot of things that will attract bees or pollinators like that. But plants, obviously, those are the most,
right.
That's what they're going towards. What kind of plants out there should people be planting to attract more pollinators? I know there's a huge list of them, and I have my list of favorites. So what's some of your favorites?
Okay, but then you tell me your favorites too, because I like plants.
well, there's I have a huge list of them, but I like Vitex or lilac chase tree.
Yeah.
That's a really good one. Attracts a lot of bees.
Bumblebees especially.
Yeah, I really like that tree. It's tough, and I think it's really underused. A lot of people don't even know what it is. It's if you don't know what it is, it's a smaller tree. It stays within 20 feet, I would say, and it has a purple spike at the top. Really loves the heat. When it gets hot, it's just it's a great tree for that. So that's one of my favorites that people don't really think about putting in their landscape. Of echinacea, I love that. So that's a couple of mine. So
yeah, and both of those have things that are desirable for the bees specifically, or for the pollinators specifically. The fact that both of those flowers are cluster flowers, so the insect can sit on that flower as a compound flower and find lots of little flowers inside of that to sip from. So it is kind of like a buffet,
Yeah.
That bee or that butterfly can go to that vitex and sit there, and without moving around all over the place and wasting energy, it can sip from lots of small flowers at one time. So they really like that. Those flowers that are compound flowers, it's one flower that's made up of a lot of smaller flowers. So your vitex is one. Another really common flower that's compound would be like a lantana. That's one that pretty much everybody knows. It's one big flower made up of a lot of smaller flowers. And then composite flowers. So flowers that are, they have petals on the outside and a big disc on the inside. And that's another one that's just a bunch of flowers all jammed together. They're really tiny, so it just looks like one flower to us, but to the bee, it looks like a bunch of smaller flowers. And it's just a good way to get the maximum amount of food with the minimum amount of energy. So any sort of flower that's an umbel flower or a compound flower is really good. Another thing to look for is flowers that aren't hybridized. So those old-fashioned heirlooms. A lot of times when we breed flowers, and I know you're a plant person too, and so am I. And so I look through magazines and I see all these plants that have, like extra cool variegation, or they've, got something really neat about them that the heirloom doesn't have. And I kind of like to collect those myself. But those, in the process of breeding for whatever trait that they are looking for, that extra large flower or that really cool foliage, sometimes they breed out the nectar and the pollen production of that plant. So really sticking to heirloom plants is important. And then the other kind of plant or flower that you should stay away from is something that's got double petals. So think about a rose, right?
Yep.
Like a knockout rose is an easy one, right? We all know that. And that one, if a pollinator landed on it, they would have a really hard time finding their way down to where the pollen and nectar is, because there's so many petals. So if you stick with single flowers, those pollinators are going to be better off, easier to get to that nectar. Yeah.
So what are your favorites?
Right.
Or can you narrow that list down?
Yeah, I can. Well, so echinacea, you mentioned that purple coneflower. I've got that blooming in my yard, and I really like it because, number one, it blooms for a long time.
Yeah.
It is a native plant. Any sort of native plant is going to be a better fit for our native pollinators. So that's another thing to look for, is native plants. The purple coneflower is always got some sort of a native pollinator on it in my landscape. They bloom for a good long time, and then over the winter, the birds always show up to eat the seeds, which is, I know they're not pollinators in this sense, but it's another reason that I really like that purple coneflower. And it's also very easy to grow. It kind of seeds out well. Another one that I've got in my landscape that I've been super happy with is, and it was the perennial plant of the year a couple of years back, it's called Calamintha. That's the genus Calamintha. And I know it's got the word mint in it, which probably is scary to some people, because what do you think when you think mint?
Yeah, it takes over everything.
Right. Well, this doesn't. This so far is just a small clumping plant, but from dawn to dusk, there is a buzz around that plant. Something is on that plant, and it will bloom.
Pun intended.
It is a buzz. Yes. And it will bloom until fall. So
Yeah.
I've been really happy with that.
So is it in the mint family, or what's the common name, or do you know?
I need to look that up. I
Yeah.
should have looked that up beforehand. But it's just been a spectacular pollinator plant, and it's fairly drought tolerant, in the full sun. There doesn't require any deadheading. It's just a really easy plant to plant and let go. Probably my third favorite pollinator plant is mountain mint. And okay, once again, it's got the word mint in it.
Yeah.
So it's a little scary, but it's a native plant that doesn't really spread like mint. It does spread, but not nearly as aggressively.
It's not going to take over.
Right, as like a spearmint or something. But it gets about 3 feet tall, and it's got a silver flower on it. And that also is always covered in some sort of pollinator. And it blooms for the majority of the summer.
Yeah. All right. So any other plants that you really love that, or something that maybe is underutilized that people need to really consider?
Sure. Well, I think you could, another good, when you're thinking about food sources, another good thing to consider is the season in which those food sources are flowering, right? Nature has spring covered. Like we don't need to like add extra plants for spring because there's gobs of plants blooming in the spring. Mm-hmm. But as we get closer to fall, so that late summer and into fall, both of those seasons, if you just think about your own landscape, things sort of, it dries up, things sort of stop blooming slows because it's so dry. What nectar is there is usually less because it's so dry out. So really thinking about planting for late summer and fall is a really good idea. That's what the pollinators would probably most appreciate, that extra food source. So things like asters are really great. They bloom late season, all the way up into frost, and my garden sometimes after frost I've still got asters blooming. Salvias are another good one that bloom really late into the season, and I've got honeybees at my house, and they are all over that salvia in the late summer. So really think about trying to provide food sources for later in the season. Don't worry about spring. That's covered.
So speaking of honeybees, there's a lot of insects that we have out there that can cause harm to our plants. One in particular I'm thinking of is Japanese beetles. Right. People have a huge, we have just been inundated with Japanese beetles. We have every year. It's just kind of a fact of life that we have them now. So how can we treat those type insects without harming our pollinators? Or is there anything that's safe chemical-wise that we can spray?
Sure. That's a good question. One good thing to link here would be Alabama Extension has a publication called Protecting Pollinators in Urban Areas, and it's got a list on the back of it of the things that are safe to use for pollinators, safer, and the things that are not safe at all. So that would be a really good thing to link or to look up, just so you've got that list on hand. But there are some things that you can do if you've got Japanese beetles. In fact, I have Japanese beetles in my yard as well. Yeah. And, the easiest thing to do, and it's super safe, and I do it in my yard, is I've got beetles. And so I just take a little cup and I put some water in it, and then I just put a squirt of soap in it, Dawn dish soap, whatever. And then I take it out there and I just knock those bugs right down in there. There's no chemical getting on anything that could hurt a pollinator. It's only getting those bugs that I want to kill. And you knock them in there and they drown in that soapy water. So that's one thing that's super easy. It also helps you spend time in your landscape. Yeah. You're out there knocking off those Japanese beetles or whatever bug, and it's giving you time in your yard to see what is lovely to look at or what is a problem. So that's one thing you can do.
But don't spray your plants with the dish soap.
No. Right. Don't spray your plants with the dish soap. Just a nice little cup.
That rumor's out there. It's all over social media, so please don't do that.
Right. So other things that you can do if you've got insects that you really have got to treat are, first, the time that you spray is important. So we always say that pollinators work banker's hours, 8 to 5. They go to bed at night when the sun goes down, and then you don't see them till the next morning. So if you need to spray something, we'd recommend that you spray in the evening around sundown, and that's fairly safe for your pollinators. Another thing that you can do is if you know you've got something that needs spraying and it's got flowers on it, you can cut those flowers off or mow the flowers off. If it's in your lawn, you need to spray something on your lawn, mow the flowers off. And then the pollinators are going for flowers. If there's no flowers there, there's probably not going to be any pollinators there, right? So that will keep the pollinators away while you treat. That's another thing to do.
Yeah, I listened to something the other day, and he mentioned, clover. if you're gonna have to spray for something, especially Japanese beetles, treating them at the right time is essential. You gotta treat them at the right stage of development. If you have any kind of grubs in your lawn, just top the flowers off the
Right.
And it's like, oh, that makes sense.
Right, right. It's a simple thing that I think people don't really think about, and and it works.
Yeah.
Take away the food source, and the pollinator will not be there, and it'll grow back.
Yeah.
And that's another. You talked about food sources. That's another great source for pollinators is those lawn weeds, as we call them. So many people have just a straight Bermuda lawn or a straight zoysia lawn, and if you can incorporate some clover in there, or spring beauty, or violets, oxalis, any of those things are really great for pollinators.
So we kind of talked a little bit about pollinators in general, and especially landscape plants, but what about in our gardens? Same thing for gardens. Do we need to plant these flowers around our garden, or what can we do to attract more when we're having a garden?
Yeah, just as many flowering plants as you can. That will attract pollinators. And it will get the pollinators to stay in your landscape full time. You think about butterflies are considered a pollinator, although they're probably not the strongest of pollinators. The other thing that you can do for those is to plant those habitat plants, or the food sources for caterpillars. So things like milkweed, anything in that carrot family, fennel, dill, carrots, parsley, any of those are really great for swallowtail caterpillars as well. So adding the caterpillar food sources into your landscape, incorporating those will be helpful. Making sure you've got some pollinator habitat nearby those flowering plants. In my landscape, I've got, don't judge me.
No judgment.
They were there when I moved in, but I've got nandinas.
Oh, yeah.
And they're the non-flowering kind. It's just that little shrub of foliage that's don't judge me.
I hear you.
They're right next to my flowering plants, and it provides a place for butterflies and other pollinators to light and be protected. I was in my landscape last year, and I walked by one of my nandinas, and I knocked it with my foot, and like 5 butterflies flew out. So, they really do use that kind of thing.
So they do serve a purpose.
Small, and there would still be better plants for that.
Yeah.
But they did serve a purpose.
Yeah. Well, we have a couple of Nandina haters here, so I get it. But yeah, they pay attention, when you're walking out in your landscape, pay attention to what's out there and see if you can see anything crawling on it. Not all bugs are bad.
Right.
There's good bugs and bad bugs.
You think about the variety of pollinators, especially with specifically native bees. There's 4,000 species of native bees in the United States. 4,000.
That's insane.
That's huge.
Yeah.
And they all look different. Some are bigger than your thumb. Some are, a quarter of an inch.
Yeah.
I mean, they're all different colors. There's some that are metallic green. Those are probably my favorite. There's metallic blue bees. I mean, there's just a wide variety of colors and shapes and sizes. Nature's really cool.
So what about some pollinators that can be harmful or nuisance pollinators?
Okay, the pollinators we love to hate, right?
Yeah.
So there's one that always comes up, and that is the carpenter bee.
Oh, yeah.
I mean...
Get a lot of calls about that one.
Right. Understand. I totally understand, because this is your structure. You have paid good money for this structure, and something is boring holes in it. Carpenter bees are really great pollinators,
Yeah.
But when they are digging galleries into your wood, that's problematic. And so that's probably the one that we get the most calls on about how to prevent. And I totally understand that. I think the best way, the least toxic way, is just to use one of those carpenter bee traps. You know what I'm talking about? It's got a square of wood at the bottom and a jar on top. And those are actually pretty good at attracting those carpenter bees, and it really only gets those carpenter bees.
Yeah, there's nothing inside of it, right?
Nope. It's just a block of wood and a glass jar.
They just love to, they're attracted to wood. So.
Right. And if you'll put them, because carpenter bees come back to the same location from year to year, and the eggs they lay, their babies come back to that same spot as well a lot of times. And so if you'll put it where you're seeing the damage, then you'll get more bees that way. You'll get more carpenter bees in that trap.
That's a good tip, because we get tons of calls about what I do about carpenter bees, and they are very much a nuisance. And
right,
I would say of the pollinators, that's probably the number one thing is what do I do? And, you can also paint. If it's something you can do, you can paint a fence or something, and that will keep them out too. So.
They're difficult to control, though.
Yeah, they are.
So
they are.
And you probably know this, but the bumblebee and the carpenter bee, they do a strange sort of pollination called buzz pollination. And so they don't, they are hairy, and they do get some pollen on them and transfer from one flower to the other, but they sit there and you can hear the carpenter bees just buzz, 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 buzz. And that's their way of pollinating a lot of plants. Things like tomatoes specifically use that buzz pollination to pollinate the tomato.
It's interesting. So they get up next to the male part and they kind of shake the pollen off of it.
Yeah, they just vibrate completely. Their whole bodies just vibrate, and it shakes because some pollen is extra sticky.
Yeah,
and so that shakes it loose. Yeah,
that's interesting.
Yeah.
Well, is there anything else on pollinators?
I have one really cool thing that I can share with you.
Sure.
And this is something that I learned just a couple of years ago, but I think it's really cool, is that we can't see it, but pollinators see a different range than we do. They can see ultraviolet. And one really cool thing to do, if you've got some extra time, is just to Google nectar guides of flowers. So a lot of flowers... we just see our normal range, but some flowers have specific little guides that guide the pollinator to where the nectar is. They're called nectar guides, and they're in that UV spectrum. And so if you just Google it, you can see some really interesting nectar guides on flowers. One specific one is dandelion, right? What does a dandelion look like?
Which part?
The flower.
Well, the flower. Yeah, I'm thinking of the spent old. That's what people think of when you think dandelion. But they're the little yellow flowers.
A yellow flower.
Yeah.
But when a bee looks at it, they see like a bluish color on the inside. The center of that flower has these UV nectar guides in there that are a different color, and so they follow that different color, and it guides them right to the nectar.
Wow.
Isn't that interesting?
That's really interesting.
Yeah. A lot of flowers have them, and we can't see them. It's just a neat thing.
So it's not necessarily what the petals are, right?
Sometimes you can see it. We can see it on the petals. Sometimes you'll see a streak going towards the center, but sometimes it's in that UV spectrum that we can't see.
Wow.
It's really neat.
That is really neat.
Nature's cool.
Yeah. Well, Allyson, thank you for being with me today talking about pollinators. So if you need more information, there's plenty of information on our website, aces.edu. We also have programs throughout the year on different programs. We also have a bee symposium every year. You want to talk about that real quick?
Sure. If you are into honeybees, which I am also into honeybees, we have a Alabama Extension Beekeeping Symposium. It's the first weekend in February every year. Even if you're just interested in bees and don't have bees, it's a really cool thing to come and sit in on. It's 2 days worth of classes. It's 1 day worth of classes, all on beekeeping. And there's a big vendor floor with lots of vendors. You can buy all sorts of bee-related things as well. And then we also have a beekeeping newsletter, which features every month from the Auburn Bee Lab a pollinator of the month. And you can learn about a new strange bee that you probably didn't even know existed.
Wow,
So
that's cool.
you could register for that on our website as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you for being with us, and hopefully you will take some of these practices and incorporate them into your lawn, your landscape, or your garden, and hopefully you can attract more pollinators. So thanks again.
Thank you.
From the Ground Up is a production of the Alabama Cooperative Extension System.